Do you think that they become the team that nobody wants to face, or could it go in the other direction?
They have a lot of traits that, good teams don't possess. Special teams are an atrocity and a continuing problem.
Welcome back to Damon Bruce Plus, and welcome to Mike Silver, a man who I think is hit for the official career cycle with his latest. You're now with The Athletic, Michael. It's been NFL Network, Sports Illustrated, all stops in between. Great to see you, man. How you doing?
Great, Damon. Thanks for having me.
It is really good to have you. Really good to see you. You've been blessed. You've been kissed on the head by a time traveler. You can go back in history to your favorite sporting event or your favorite concert. Which way are you going, Silver?
I'm reliving something. It's something I have been to before. I mean, I have so many good choices. I was at the Play as a high school senior, which was a formative experience. But, my friends and I, we talk about how going to Cal in the mid-'80s, we got to see so many Grateful Dead shows with Jerry in his prime, of course. And probably at the time we thought maybe we're going to too many. But in retrospect, we should have gone to more. So one more Greek show, mid-'80s, Grateful Dead. Let me just have one more of those. And
one more Saturday night, right? I mean, come on.
Although I don't want to hear that particular song.
No, wouldn't want that. You're right. Nothing off greatest hits. We want deeper cuts, of course. It's been so long since we've talked, Mike. Two members of the Dead have passed away, both Philip Lesh and Bill Walton, obviously. So it's good to see you, man. It's been too long. Congrats on the book, by the way. I know it's doing great. The holidays are around the corner. Sell it, baby. Sell it.
Yes, this is my new book, The Why is Everything. I think people are going to love it, especially around here, because it's about the Shanahan coaching crew, basically. So it starts with Mike Shanahan and gets into the Mike Shanahan, Steve Young resurrection in the early 90s when Mike Shanahan showed up as an embattled coach and became George Seifert's offensive coordinator. And then we get that Washington staff in the early 2010s that has now current head coaches Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel, Matt LaFleur, Raheem Morris, and all their various offshoots. And there is a lot. I mean, we get into a lot of high concept stuff about how these guys think and how they've changed the game. But trust me, a lot of pettiness, a lot of dirt, a lot of behind the scenes stuff that people don't know, and very, very Niner heavy. So I think people are going to love it.
There's a generational torch being passed from one generation of coaches to another for sure. And obviously Shanahan's are at the center of this. Let's start with the 49ers. Obviously what surrounds us, they've got an awful lot of traits that good football teams need to have. They also share an awful lot of traits with bad football teams. The truth somewhere in the middle. Do you think that they become in the second half here, Silver, the team that nobody wants to face, or could it go in the other direction?
Well, it's certainly possible that they could become that team. And the arguments for would be, hey, Christian McCaffrey came back, looked like himself. If that holds up, that's a big, big deal, not just in terms of production, but scheme flexibility and some of the stuff I get into in The Why is Everything. But that's huge. And then presumably Dre Greenlaw, if he can come back and look like Dre Greenlaw, say in a couple of weeks, that's a huge boost to a defense that needs it. And so you combine that with just how much success Kyle Shanahan has had in these last few years with having these rough starts or rough points heading into the midpoint of the season and then turning it on and rolling. And you go, yeah, sure, that could totally happen. The arguments against would be, I think you bring up some good points. They have a lot of traits that, good teams don't possess. Special teams are an atrocity and a continuing problem. The defense has not overwhelmed people the way it did certainly 2 years ago when it was the number one unit in the league. There's some good things happening, but Javon Hargrave going out has left them less potent in the middle of the defensive line in terms of able to generate push and stop the run, which is a weakness, that interior run defense in the wide nine scheme. Greenlaw can maybe help some of that when he's back, but there's certainly some reasons where you would say, I don't know if it's going to happen this year. what they would be betting on is that their quarterback in his third year, Brock Purdy, can become more transcendent. And he's already been really, really good. But perhaps Brock Purdy can elevate to a degree where these other great players around him will help carry them to greater heights, and the offense will have a little more of the burden than it did, in the past.
It's like he sees the Matrix. Can he become freaking Keanu Reeves? Like that's what the 49ers really, really need. I am sure that a reoccurring theme in your book is Kyle Shanahan's almost painful attention to detail. And I know that he loves to explain, like you said in the title of your book, the why is everything. He's always explaining why things happen so players embrace the process even more. Why is a coach with so much attention to detail turning such a blind eye to a constantly occurring special teams issue? It seems against his programming.
I'm so glad you asked. So I wrote about this, recently left the San Francisco Chronicle after a couple of great years plus, and loved it. But one of the last columns I wrote was about the special teams atrocity. And really for me, so I got to take people back. I started covering the 49ers in 1989. For the now defunct Sacramento Union. I was just out of college. And then after that for the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat. And that was George Seifert's first year, 89, coming off the Walsh years. And Seifert's special teams coach was a really nice man named Lynn Stiles, who had been his college roommate at Utah State. And the 49ers did not have very good special teams in those years that I covered them. And we always joked, well, George isn't going to fire his college roommate. But the degree to which they would live with that was, in retrospect, kind of striking. And I always tell people their attitude back then was, people say special teams are a third of the game. It's really more like, I don't know, a ninth. And we're so good on offense and defense that whatever, we'll just win anyway.
Right, just don't blow it there. Don't give games away there, and that's the job.
Well, listen, I mean, you have Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Ronnie Lott, Steve Young, some of the greatest players of all time, and they were still winning, most of their games, even though their special teams weren't good. So it's really informed the way that I see special teams. I think decades later, I still haven't seen them as important as a lot of other people do. And yet I've been exposed to people who care so much about them, the Belichicks of the world. So when I was writing this column for the Chronicle, I got two people on the phone who I know care about him. And one was Pete Carroll and one was Mike Vrabel, who came out of the Belichick, zone, obviously. And they explained to me why they valued it and what it meant. But with Pete, it was really cool because his special teams coach in Seattle when they were really good was Brian Schneider, which would tell me that since he's the 49ers special teams coach now, it might not be him. It might be an organizational thing. And secondly, I said to Pete, because Pete got there in 95, and I had gone to Sports Illustrated, but I was still around a lot. And that's kind of how I got to know Pete Carroll. And I said, this is what it was like when I was there in terms of how they viewed special teams. Is that what it was like when you got there? And he goes, yeah, totally. They just, George was still the coach. He goes, they didn't care. Kyle Shanahan, for all his brilliance and gifts as a head coach, does have some interesting ways of expressing things that, people criticize. And one thing he has expressed since I've been around on more than one occasion is that he just wants special teams not to screw it up. He views it as, look, you can really hurt us by being bad, but we're not shooting for being the difference here. And that's a weird way to think. And he has even said, David, I remember last year, somebody talked to Kyle about how he never fakes punts. And he essentially said, that's what teams do that need gimmicks to win. We think we can win just on offense and defense. We don't have to steal possessions around here, which is an incredibly arrogant sounding, thing. And
right. It's like, hey, I appreciate a good old, fashioned musket warfare, but there's also guerrilla warfare and the element of surprise work.
We don't need to sneak around or fool you. We're so smart with our play calling and our scheme that we'll just, win it that way. So Kyle has said things like that. He has said, I want special teams not to screw it up. And so I think this permeates very much from the top. Brian Schneider is very likely going to take the fall for this as the special teams coach. And that's just the way the league works. But he was Pete Carroll's special teams coach when they were really, really good for a long time. I think this is an organizational ethos, and it hasn't always been that way from the time I'm talking about till now, because when Harbaugh was there, I think they cared more. There have been times where they really cared about special teams, but that's the Walsh Seifert origin, that it wasn't super accentuated.
Right. We're going to student body left, student body right. Here it comes. It's a little bit more complicated than that right now. Speaking of a little complicated, I think Aaron Rodgers has been wearing that crown for quite a while for a lot of different reasons, right? And now the Jets feel more complicated than they were ever supposed to feel. Maybe if they had just stuck with Zach Wilson, for goodness sakes. Firing Saleh was the wrong plan. The Jets are a mess.
It's dysfunction junction. You're not wrong. And it starts from the top. And that's Woody Johnson. And there's a school of thought that, I haven't worked for NFL Network for a few years now. And there's a school of thought that now that I'm at The Athletic, I should bring back owner rankings, which I did for SI and Yahoo for years and years. And if that happens,
NFL Network frowned on that column.
It just felt like since they own the network, it was a good time to take a little break.
Okay.
But now I don't work for them anymore, so I would love to
bring it back. Love to bring it back. But if I do, which there's a decent chance I will, Woody Johnson is not going to have to worry about like the headline and what comes below it. He's going to have to scroll really, really, really far down, if not all the way down, because he's one of the worst owners in the league and in sports. And there are a lot of reasons for this. And one of them is that he's impulsive. He acts like a fan, like he acts like a guy on Twitter. Oh my God, my team's losing. Fire this guy. We need to do this. We should trade for him. Change the quarterback, change the GM, always.
And look, good owners fire coaches and change quarterbacks and oversee that. But there's a process. There's a conviction in what you believe. There's a listening to your football people, and there's an organizational stability over time. This is a guy who will come up with a plan and then make a left turn because who knows why. Somebody got in his ear, or he saw something on social media, or someone in our business said something. And going all in on Aaron Rodgers wasn't necessarily a terrible idea, given where the Jets were, in that the Buccaneers did it with Tom Brady, and he was even older, and they got a Super Bowl.
Hey, it really worked for 4 plays.
And Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest players of all time. And I understand the impulse to go get him, and I understand if you're going to get him, let's surround him with some people that he thinks can help him win. They went a little far in that direction, and obviously he got hurt, and they are not in a very good spot.
Mike, speaking of not a good spot, if you had a lot of feedback from either your coaches or the guys on your team saying, well, there's this spot in the stadium that I'm getting sun glare so severely through, could we just pull a curtain closed there? Do you think that would be a wise strategic move for an NFL franchise to stop a sun from blinding their offensive attempts?
I think, when things go bad, we look for excuses, and sometimes things just go bad. Dak Prescott's out for the year. DeMarcus Lawrence has been out. Micah was out. And some of it is, it's very fair to look at the Cowboys and go, he said he was all in. He didn't get aggressive over the offseason. I think once you start losing and looking for excuses, then it's, well, they have tours in their building. Really? Like, that shouldn't be a reason. And maybe CeeDee Lamb got blinded on one play, but the difference between Jerry and Woody Johnson is like the difference between, CeeDee Lamb couldn't catch the ball because the sun was in his eyes, and the former and soon-to-be future president staring at the eclipse early in his tenure, last time when they said to everyone, you got to wear these special glasses or do not look at the eclipse. And he was just like, ooh, like, I think, that would be my analogy of Jerry versus Woody.
Okay. So you were around the Commanders like in some dark days for a while there. And now look at what a difference an ownership change and a quarterback will do. It's been 30 years since this franchise has mattered. Generations of football fans don't even really understand like how big the Redskins used to be. What a monster they were. And it feels like a serious giant is starting to wake up again a little bit.
Yeah. And, I could say, look, it's early. We're not, we don't know if they're quite there this year. But the reason it feels like that, two reasons. One, they got rid of one of the worst owners ever in sports and seem to have good ownership. And two, they have a young quarterback who looks transcendent the way CJ Stroud did last year. And that changes the vibe considerably. Yeah, I'm really happy for them. I'm happy for their fans. And they have a chance to, do some cool things in the short term and certainly in the long term. Wow, it could get really, really cool.
Let's wrap up with this, Mike, because I saw a tweet from Rich Gannon, who's a guy I used to do like a weekly interview with. I like Rich Gannon an awful lot. He's a smart guy. He knows about the sport. He cares about it. He understands the history, the future. He sees a lot of the Matrix. And he was talking about how I think 30 head coaches have been cycled through over just the last 4 years. And he says it all comes down to the fact quarterback play is direct. If he's right about that, how has that happened with us living in the single most obsessed with football moment in time in recorded human history? How is the specialized coaching of quarterbacks from almost zygote not produced a better generation of quarterbacks that the NFL is getting fed to them through college, through high school? Where is the break in what happened to great quarterback play, if you agree with what Rich Gannon even said in the first place?
I would say this. It has changed considerably, and this does relate to my book, The Why Is Everything, somewhat, in that, for a long time it was, we have a system, I have a system, and we're going to draft a quarterback, and we're going to make them learn this system. And, if they have to sit and wait for a while, that's fine, but they're going to learn this system and do it our way. And this group, the Shanahan-McVay crew, is much more willing to say, let's just see what they do well, throw them in, and we'll change our system. The most glaring example of that, which we get into heavily in the book, is when RG3 gets drafted in 2012, and Kyle Shanahan and all those assistants end up doing something super radical, which is they transport the entire Shanahan outside zone scheme and run it out of the pistol, which is all RG3 knew, and took the league by storm that first year. It was crazy. So I think, quarterbacks are playing right away. Coaches in general are more willing to just say, fine, we'll run college stuff. We'll run RPOs. It doesn't have to be this super sophisticated pro stuff like it used to be. We'll just run, stuff they can do from the jump. And I think the last piece of this is that college offenses have gotten way more, way less sophisticated. And so you're not seeing offensive linemen prepared, certainly, for what has been the NFL's way of running offenses. And you're not seeing quarterbacks prepared. And really, this started a while back, like Alex Smith, great example. He came from Urban Meyers. So that's been accentuated. You have guys who just aren't as pro ready by what were pro standards. So that's maybe part of what Rich is seeing.
Here we are at the halfway point. Does it feel Lions Ravensy to you? Lions Chiefsy? What kind of a Super Bowl do you think we're going to be looking at, Mike Silver?
I mean, you always just pick the Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes is inevitable. But I'm going to go out, I think, and spend some time in Detroit, see the quarterback who, that's his college helmet above me. I know him well. Try to get a little sense of what they're doing. And, I'll have some fun stuff coming up.
All I can say about the Lions is it might be your year when you're on the road throwing 5 interceptions and still winning. That's, just throwing that out there. Great to see you, Mike. Thanks so much for stopping on by. You take care, man. Let's do it again sometime soon.
Thanks for watching. Tune into the Damon Bruce Show live on YouTube every weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific.